I never thought knocking on the wrong door could change everything, until she smirked and said, "Don't run, you knocked on my door first." I had only meant to drop off a borrowed book at my friend's house, a simple, ordinary errand, but somehow, my footsteps led me to the wrong door. It was late afternoon, the sunlight spilling through the trees in golden streaks, painting the quiet suburban street with a warm glow. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the brass doorknob. Something made me pause, an instinct, a fleeting thought, but curiosity won, and I knocked. The door swung open almost immediately, revealing her. My friend's mom. Or, well, not exactly as I remembered. She was standing there, arms crossed lightly, a playful smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. Her hair, soft waves catching the light, framed a face that held a quiet confidence, yet her eyes, deep, knowing, almost mischievous, hinted at warmth beneath the poised exterior. She looked older, yes, but in a way that carried elegance and understated allure, the kind that makes you forget the years and notice the presence instead. "Don't run, you knocked on my door first," she said, her voice smooth, teasing, and somehow disarming. I froze, the object in my hand suddenly feeling heavier. My words stumbled, simple hellos twisting into awkward introductions. There was a rhythm to her smile, a subtle ease that made the air between us feel charged in a way I wasn't prepared for. My palms were warm, my heart beat loud enough that I was certain she could hear it. I noticed the faint scent of her perfume, soft, almost floral, lingering in the doorway. It was comforting but electrifying all at once. The hallway behind her was bathed in a gentle amber light, and the faint hum of a ceiling fan made the moment feel intimate, like a small world had contracted around us. I tried to avert my gaze, but her eyes held me. There was humor there, a glint of curiosity, and a calm confidence that left me flustered. My fingers fidgeted around the book I'd brought, betraying my attempt to appear composed. She tilted her head slightly, the smirk lingering, as though she knew exactly what she was doing, how just a few words, a look, a pause, could make a 24-year-old boy suddenly feel exposed and small in the most surprising way. For a moment, I wasn't thinking about the book, or why I was there. I was just aware of her, the quiet strength, the subtle charm, the way the ordinary hallway suddenly felt like the center of the universe. And in that brief, fleeting instant, I understood that this accidental knock had already changed the day, the story, maybe even something about me. The first knock had already unsettled me more than I cared to admit, but when she stepped aside and invited me in, I found myself hesitating at the threshold, caught between manners and curiosity. The air inside was warm, comforting in a way that made the hum of the ceiling fan fade into background noise. Sunlight streamed softly through sheer curtains, casting delicate patterns on the polished wooden floor. "Come in," she said again, her tone light but steady, as if she had been expecting me, or perhaps hoping I'd stay. I shifted the book in my hands nervously, unsure if I should follow or retreat. Her presence drew me in, though, not with force, but with a quiet authority that made retreat feel impossible. The kitchen smelled faintly of baked cookies, sweet but not overpowering, mingling with the gentle, earthy scent of her perfume. I couldn't help noticing the little things, the soft creases near her eyes when she smiled, the smooth curve of her neck as she tilted her head while speaking, the way her hands moved with ease, resting lightly on the counter. Every detail seemed to imprint itself on me, making the mundane act of standing in someone's kitchen feel intensely personal. We talked about small things at first, books, mutual acquaintances, the weather, but even in casual conversation, there was a magnetic pull between us. I found myself leaning in slightly, drawn to her warmth, her voice, the quiet rhythm of her laughter. When she reached to hand me a cup of tea, our fingers brushed just briefly, a fleeting contact that sent an unexpected spark through my chest. I tried to play it off, clearing my throat, but I couldn't ignore the tiny jolt of awareness that traveled from my fingers up my arm. She noticed it, I think. There was a subtle lift of her brow, a teasing glimmer in her eyes that made my heart race in a way I hadn't anticipated. I wanted to look away, but something in her calm gaze anchored me. I realized that, while I had come to drop off a book, I was now acutely aware of her presence in every sense, the soft hum of her energy, the unspoken questions in her smile, the way her space felt somehow like a world I was invited into but didn't yet belong. We lingered over small talk longer than either of us intended. I noticed the comfort she radiated, the way her posture relaxed when she leaned slightly closer, and the quiet, almost imperceptible way she studied me, like she could see my thoughts before I spoke them. There was something deliciously forbidden in the tension, the subtle curiosity, the age gap difference that wasn't talked about but hovered in every glance and gesture. By the time I left, I knew this encounter would not be the last. Something unspoken had begun, a delicate, intoxicating thread that had quietly wrapped itself around both of us, promising more than either of us could yet name. A few days later, I found myself standing at her door again, this time under the pretense of returning a small item my friend had asked me to bring back. My chest felt tight with anticipation, a mix of guilt, curiosity, and something I couldn't quite name. The hallway looked smaller, warmer somehow, and the soft hum of the fan overhead carried a quiet intimacy I hadn't noticed before. She opened the door with that same smirk, the one that seemed to know exactly how she affected me. "Back so soon?" she teased, her tone light, casual, yet layered with a warmth that made my stomach twist in an unfamiliar, pleasant way. Her eyes caught mine, holding them a moment longer than necessary, and I felt my hands fumble with the item I was holding. She gestured toward the living room. "Sit," she said, settling herself on the edge of the sofa. I obeyed, careful to leave a polite distance between us, but my knees brushed hers, and the shock of the accidental contact made me instantly aware of how close we were. She didn't move away. Instead, she leaned slightly forward, elbows resting lightly on her knees, giving the impression of casual ease, but I could feel the subtle energy radiating from her. We talked about life, books, work, memories that seemed ordinary but revealed glimpses of who we really were. She shared a story about a recent trip she had taken, her voice calm yet animated, full of small gestures that made me laugh or pause in admiration. Every time she laughed, the sound felt like it wrapped around me, filling the quiet room with warmth. At some point, our hands brushed again, barely, as if accidental, and I felt that familiar spark. This time, I didn't pull away immediately. I noticed her gaze linger, softening, almost tender. Her eyes seemed to see past the surface, catching the hesitation and curiosity that I hadn't dared speak aloud. My heart raced, and yet there was a strange sense of safety in her presence, a quiet reassurance that made the risk feel worth it. I caught myself noticing the little things, the faint lines of experience around her eyes, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she laughed, the subtle sway of her hair as she gestured while speaking. And then there was the warmth of her near me, the intangible gravity that made the air feel charged, the quiet intensity that made a simple room feel like a private world. When I left that day, I realized something had shifted. Our connection was no longer casual or accidental, it had begun to deepen in a way that neither of us could ignore. That first private moment, brief and ordinary on the surface, had planted a seed, one that would grow slowly, quietly, but insistently, pulling me toward her in ways I wasn't ready to understand. After that private moment in her living room, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. Every glance, every accidental touch, every soft laugh lingered like a melody I couldn't forget. But along with fascination came hesitation, an uneasy awareness of the age difference, of social boundaries, and of the silent judgments that might exist beyond her front door. I tried to focus on reason, on logic, but emotions had a way of creeping past caution, uninvited and persistent. It was a rainy evening when I found myself outside her house again, unplanned but inevitable. Water streamed down the windows, tracing patterns that caught the dim glow of the hallway light. The soft patter of rain on the roof created a rhythm that mirrored my heartbeat, steady, urgent, anxious. When she opened the door, I noticed her immediately, not just as the woman I had been drawn to, but as someone who could sense the conflict within me. "You're quiet tonight," she observed, her voice low and gentle, carrying a warmth that contrasted sharply with the storm outside. She stepped aside, letting me in, and I followed, careful but aware of the tension between us. The hallway smelled faintly of wet earth and her lingering perfume, a combination that made my chest tighten unexpectedly. We ended up in the living room again, sitting side by side on the sofa. I kept a deliberate distance at first, hesitant to close the space we had naturally carved. But even in that cautious posture, I felt the gravitational pull of her presence. Her fingers brushed against mine lightly as she handed me a cup of tea, and I couldn't help but notice the warmth lingering long after contact ended. The conversation turned quiet, almost reflective. She shared memories of her younger days, of choices made and paths taken, her voice softening as she recounted moments of vulnerability. I listened intently, realizing how much I was drawn not only to her physical grace but to the depth of her life experience, the quiet strength that hid beneath her poised exterior. And yet, I felt the tug of conflict. Each glance she gave, each small touch, made my heart race, but the voice in my head, rational, fearful, cautious, warned me to retreat. I was painfully aware of the age gap, of the potential for misunderstanding, of the unspoken rules of friendship and family that now felt impossibly complicated. When I left that evening, the rain had slowed, leaving the world wet and glistening. My mind was a whirlwind of admiration, desire, and restraint. I wanted to see her again, to stay close, to understand the strange pull between us, but I also feared crossing an invisible line. The tension between longing and hesitation had become a quiet ache, one that hinted at a connection far deeper than I could yet name, and one I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I tried. It was another quiet afternoon when I found myself standing at her door again, this time without any pretense. I had no book to return, no favor to deliver, just an unspoken pull that drew me toward her. When she opened the door, her smile was soft, familiar, yet tinged with curiosity, as if she sensed the subtle changes in me that I wasn't even fully aware of. "Come in," she said, stepping aside. The warmth of her home wrapped around me instantly. The faint aroma of her perfume mixed with the subtle scent of freshly brewed tea, grounding me in the moment and making the space feel intimate, safe, and unmistakably personal. We sat together on the sofa, closer than before, but not so close as to be uncomfortable. There was a calm ease in the room, a quiet understanding that neither of us had to rush. She began talking about her childhood, stories filled with laughter and minor heartbreaks, and I found myself sharing my own experiences more openly than ever before. Something about her presence made vulnerability feel natural, even safe. Her eyes met mine often, steady and encouraging, drawing out thoughts and feelings I usually kept locked away. There was a subtle, magnetic rhythm to our conversation, pauses filled with unspoken understanding, moments where her hand brushed mine when reaching for her tea, the soft warmth lingering longer than expected. My chest tightened in a way I recognized now, the kind of nervous excitement that comes from being truly seen. At one point, she laughed at a story I shared, leaning slightly toward me, and I noticed the quiet intimacy in the small gestures, the tilt of her head, the softness in her gaze, the way her fingers lingered near mine as if inviting contact without demanding it. I felt a surprising mix of comfort and exhilaration, a magnetic pull that made me ache for more yet also appreciate the gentleness of the moment. There was no rush, no pressure, only the gradual realization that we were connecting on a deeper level. Her confidence and maturity met my youthful curiosity in a delicate balance, creating a space where emotions could flow freely. I began to understand her in ways I had never anticipated, appreciating not only her beauty and grace but also her wisdom, her quiet strength, and the subtle vulnerability she allowed me to glimpse. When I finally stood to leave, our hands brushed lightly in farewell. It was brief, almost accidental, yet it carried a weight that neither of us ignored. I walked home that evening with my chest full, my mind buzzing, and a quiet, persistent anticipation of the next time. For the first time, I realized this was no longer a casual fascination, it was a connection, deep, emotional, and undeniably real. It was a quiet evening when I found myself at her doorstep again, this time with no excuses or errands. The world outside was calm, the soft glow of streetlights spilling through the windows, reflecting off the wet pavement from a brief afternoon drizzle. When she opened the door, her smirk greeted me instantly, the same teasing look that had unsettled me the first time, now carrying a warmth that felt almost like an invitation. "Come in," she said softly, her voice steady yet layered with unspoken meaning. I stepped inside, immediately enveloped in the familiar warmth of her home, the soft hum of the ceiling fan, the faint scent of jasmine lingering in the air, and the comforting aroma of her tea brewing on the stove. We settled on the sofa, a natural closeness settling between us, and this time, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the tension we both felt. Her hand, resting casually near mine, seemed to hover for just a moment longer than necessary. I felt the subtle warmth radiating from her palm, a gentle pressure that made my chest tighten in anticipation. Our eyes met, and I caught the soft spark of recognition in her gaze, as though she understood the storm of emotions swirling inside me. The conversation flowed easily, as always, but it was in the pauses that the real connection spoke. A laugh shared over a small anecdote, a glance lingering a heartbeat too long, the quiet comfort of our shoulders brushing as we leaned slightly closer, every gesture carried a weight that words could never express. I realized I was acutely aware of her presence, the softness of her voice, the gentle cadence of her laughter, the subtle sway of her hair when she tilted her head. At one point, she shifted slightly, her arm brushing against mine. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the contact linger, feeling the warmth seep through, the quiet intimacy of her proximity enveloping me. She noticed, of course, her smirk softened, and there was a teasing light in her eyes, a playful acknowledgement of the tension simmering just beneath the surface. It was not a dramatic moment, not a declaration or confession, just a subtle, meaningful touch that spoke volumes. My heart raced, but there was also a calm, grounding comfort in being near her, in sharing a space where emotions could exist without words, without expectation. In that moment, the world outside faded, leaving only the quiet rhythm of our breathing, the warmth of her presence, and the slow, steady pull of something undeniable between us. When I left that evening, the brief touch of her hand lingering in my memory, I understood something clearly: our connection had deepened. The subtle affection, the unspoken desire, and the gentle closeness had woven a bond neither of us could ignore. And I wanted more, not recklessly, but with a patience born of quiet longing and growing understanding. The evening air was cool as I walked up the familiar path to her house, but inside, the warmth felt immediate, enveloping me the moment she opened the door. Her smirk was softer this time, her eyes holding a quiet familiarity that spoke volumes about the unspoken bond between us. It wasn't teasing now, it was an invitation, subtle but sincere, acknowledging the journey we had shared without needing to name it. "Come in," she said, her voice calm, steady, and intimate in a way that made the space feel like a private world of its own. I stepped inside, the comforting scent of her perfume blending with the faint aroma of freshly brewed tea. The lighting was soft, casting gentle shadows on the walls, the kind that made ordinary objects feel almost sacred, almost intimate. We settled together on the sofa, close but not forced, and the quiet between us was different this time. It was filled with understanding, recognition, and the ease that comes from sharing a connection that doesn't need explanation. I could feel her presence more acutely than ever, the warmth radiating from her, the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the gentle strength in her posture. Every glance, every movement carried the weight of familiarity and the thrill of something tender and carefully nurtured. At one point, she leaned just slightly closer, her hand brushing mine as she reached for her cup of tea. I didn't pull away. Our fingers touched, softly, deliberately, and the brief contact sent a steady warmth through me, a quiet confirmation of what we both felt but had never fully spoken aloud. Her eyes met mine, steady and reassuring, and I saw in them the same mix of curiosity, affection, and gentle desire that I had carried in my chest for weeks. Then came the simple, unspoken gesture that changed everything: a hug. Her arms slipped around my waist, her cheek resting lightly against my chest. I could feel her heartbeat, calm and steady, and for the first time, I let myself relax completely. The tension, the hesitation, and the questions of right or wrong dissolved in that moment. We just existed together, quietly, warmly, fully. When we finally pulled back, the faintest smiles lingered on our lips. The room was still quiet, but it no longer felt charged with anticipation, it felt peaceful, complete. We spoke softly, casually, about trivial things, but each word carried the weight of trust and understanding, of mutual respect and undeniable connection. As I walked home later that night, the memory of her hand on mine, the warmth of the hug, and the soft strength of her presence stayed with me. There were no words left unsaid, no tension left unresolved, only the quiet, steady knowledge that what had begun as a knock on the wrong door had blossomed into something real, tender, and beautifully ours. The story had reached its natural, heartwarming conclusion, leaving me with a sense of belonging, admiration, and a gentle, enduring affection that would stay with me long after the door closed behind me. If you felt the tension, the warmth, and the slow burn connection in this story, don't forget to hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a connection that surprised you like this? And make sure to subscribe for more age gap romance stories and slow burn love tales that will keep your heart racing.